Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. I've seen the lost herd. Alice was my best friend, and then one day, she wasn't. I suppose that's just how it is. You're inseparable from most of your childhood. You graduate high school, you go to the same college, you room together, and after graduation you beat the odds and remain in touch. It helps that you get jobs in the same city, and sure, you buy houses that are 30 minutes away from each other. But that's what weekend brunch is for, right? Then weekend brunch starts getting canceled, and the texting dies off, and the next thing you know, you're getting a call. And she's so excited and wants you to be her maid of honor. I think you know how it goes from here. Oh, I went to the wedding, and it was lovely. And I even put aside that sense of dread laying like a rock in my stomach, because she was my best friend, and that's what you do for best friends. You smile and wear the dress and give a lovely speech, and then you watch as she starts a new chapter of her life, and sadly acknowledge that you're not going to be one of the characters in her story anymore. And that's exactly what happened. She vanished from my life. I got the occasional Christmas card from her, and that's how I found out that she and her husband had moved out of the state. He was a real outdoorsy type. I only met him a few times before the wedding, and that was the whole of his personality. Alice had never shown much of an interest in that kind of thing before. But suddenly, it was her personality too. They went to Yellowstone for their honeymoon. She started wearing a lot of Patagonia and North Face. I suppose it's nice to find new, shared interests, but it was like her old personality dissolved as fast as our friendship. I told myself to get over it, that these things happen. People change and move on with their lives. Still, it came as a bit of a surprise to get that card with a new address in Colorado. Discovering new passions is one thing, but packing up and moving halfway across the country to someplace where you have no friends or family came as a shock to me. But it was beautiful there. They had a house up in the mountains, surrounded by woods. I saw the pictures that Alice posted on Instagram. Photos of the pronghorn and the elk. Snow-covered trees in the winter. One year, she posted a photo of a whole herd of elk bedded down in their backyard, hunkering underneath the pines to wait out a snowstorm. I began to understand the quick change in personality a little better. If someone I love had shown me all of this and told me it could be our future, I might have abandoned my old life too. Then one day she stopped posting. I worried a little bit. Was she having trouble with her marriage? Financial problems? It's a very expensive area to live in. I kept an eye on her Instagram and other social media, but all I saw was the occasional comment on someone else's post. She was still alive, but she'd stopped sharing anything of her own life. People change. Situations shift. There wasn't anything I could really do about it. When a yearly Christmas card failed to arrive, though, I sent her a text saying that I was thinking of her and hoped she was doing well. An hour later she called me. "Tabitha," she exclaimed, almost shouting at me over the phone. "It's so good to hear your voice. I'm sorry I didn't call. It was just there was so much going on after the wedding and then the move and all." "It's okay. Life gets busy on you. I understand." I did understand. I didn't like it, but I understood. "Listen, I'm sorry for neglecting our friendship. I really am. Do you want to come visit me? Like this weekend? That's like a 3-hour plane flight. I'll pay for the tickets. It can be a 'I'm sorry I'm a bad friend' gift." I hesitated, because even with the offer of a free trip, that's a lot to drop on someone. Just pack up and leave in a few days? I mentally ran through my checklist of what I needed to do around the house. I needed groceries, but I suppose if I was leaving town that could wait. Then Alice whispered, "Please," over the phone. It was the desperation in her voice that convinced me. Suddenly, her silent Instagram account began to make sense. Something was wrong. And maybe we weren't best friends anymore, and flying halfway across the country on a moment's notice wasn't really something estranged friends did, but I felt I owed it to her. For all the years we had been friends. So I let her pay for the tickets, and less than 24 hours after that phone call, I was boarding a plane to Colorado. The plane flight was rough. It had snowed in Colorado the day before, and our flight path took us around the edge of the departing storm front. It made for gorgeous scenery, though, when the plane landed. I had never seen the Rocky Mountains before, and I was stunned by their majesty when the highway curved around and they lay before me on the horizon. Their snow-capped peaks shone against the gray sky. They were the only thing on the horizon, because of course they were. Nothing else could rival them. I couldn't help but be excited, despite the strangeness of Alice's request that I visit. Alice's house was nestled in the foothills. I drove the rental through winding roads that curved alongside the edge of the mountainsides, drawing me steadily higher into the mountains. The roads were clear, but everything else was coated with a few inches of snow, still pristine and glittering in the subdued sunlight. I found myself wishing Alice had picked me up, so that I could look at the scenery instead of the road. But I'd insist on getting a rental, because if this visit turned sour, I wanted a way to leave on my own power. She hadn't mentioned her husband yet. I assumed he was gone, and they were in the throes of a messy divorce. Alice's house was a modest ranch tucked up above the main road. I zigzagged up the long drive before pulling onto a gravel driveway and stopping the car. Alice was waiting on the front porch when I got out. She half raised her hand in greeting as I got my bags out of the car. "Thanks for coming," she said. I've got a guest room for you." I scanned the exterior. It was a lovely house, well maintained. I asked how they got it, and Alice told me that it was the summer home for Daniel's parents. They were too old for this sort of thing now. At least, that's what they said when they gave him place. "Where is Daniel, anyway?" I asked. Alice's jaw tightened. She carried on as if I hadn't asked a question, prattling about how the guest bedroom opens to the back of the house, so I'd have a perfect view of the trees. I dropped my bag on the bed, and then returned to the living room. Alice was already there, staring through the sliding glass doors that opened the back porch. "Do you plan on doing any hiking while you're here?" she asked. "Not really. It's not my thing," I replied. "That's good. Hey, if you see any elk, don't go outside, okay? They get a little weird this time of the year, and they're really big animals." I promised her I'd be careful. I didn't care to be in the news as tourists trampled by angry elk. It quickly became apparent that Alice wasn't getting out much. Her small talk was awkward and forced. I tried asking about her job, and she didn't say much other than she'd gone remote some month ago. When I asked if she liked it, she said it was all right. Anytime I tried to ask about Daniel, she grew evasive. His things were still in the house. I found men's jackets in the hallway closet. When I hung mine up, there were men's shoes in the entryway, pictures of him, and Alice smiled at me from the mantel. It was like he'd simply walked out that morning and would be back in time for dinner. Finally, after I'd exhausted every topic of conversation I knew to fill the silence, I decided to try a question that Alice hopefully couldn't dodge. "So is Daniel at work?" I asked. "When do you expect him home?" "I don't know. It's hard to tell anymore when he'll be by. Maybe this evening. Could be tomorrow. Any day now, really." It seemed weird to me that she wouldn't know this. "Is he traveling for work?" "Yeah." She stared out the window, at the trees past the porch, cupping her hot tea in her hands. It felt like she wasn't there anymore, that any words I'd say would just echo in the empty house. The silence was getting to me. I wasn't used to this much quiet. No cars, no neighbors, no dog barking. I didn't know how Alice stood it. Maybe nothing was wrong. Maybe Danny was just traveling a lot lately, and Alice was lonely. I'd lose my mind if I was trapped out here with nothing but the faint breeze stirring the trees for company. "Hey, how about I go into town and pick up groceries for dinner?" I suggested. "I can cook us something." I'd had a peek at the fridge earlier. It was nearly empty, but the freezer was packed with microwave meals. "Oh, sure. That'd be nice," she said. "Do you want to come?" "No, I should stay here in case Daniel gets home." So 30 minutes of driving later, I found myself in a small grocery store with wooden floors and only 5 aisles. Their selection was surprisingly good for such a small store, however, and I settled on a couple of steaks and some potatoes. As I approached the checkout, I found a couple locals engaged in a hushed, anxious conversation. "I think they're coming," the woman was saying. "Could be as early as this evening." "Did you see them?" the cashier asked. "No, but I was just at the bakery and Grace said she heard them pass by her house this morning." Grace likes to stir up drama. "Yeah, but they're due any day now." Their conversation trailed off as I approached. I put my items on the counter and the cashier rang me up. The woman hovered nearby, politely waiting for me to leave before they resumed their discussion. I want to confront them about it and demand to know what was going on, but I suppose I could always ask Alice. She'd lived here long enough. She might know what they were talking about, and that way I'd avoid a conversation with people I didn't know. I did pause at the exit to the store, rummaging in my purse as if I had forgotten something. The locals hadn't resumed their debate on whether or not Grace was trustworthy. Instead, the cashier had abandoned his post and was now hastily lowering all the blinds in the store. He was doing so with a strange urgency, running from window to window, and no one in the store seemed surprised by his frantic haste. "Hey Alice, I'm back," I yelled as I entered the house. "I got a steak. We can't use a grill." Her reply was so immediate and curt that it made me pause. "Sure," I said. "I can cook on the stove instead. You shouldn't go on the porch for any reason." I turned to find a pan to sear the steaks in, and was startled to find Alice directly behind me. She grabbed my wrist, and her fingers dug into my tendons. I winced, but her eyes were wide and wild, and she did not relent. "I mean it. Don't go out there. I promise I won't." I gasped, stunned. "Please, let go." She released me and stumbled back, startled by her own actions. She stared at her hands for a moment in confusion, then hastily turned her back. She seemed so different with her shoulders hunched and her head down. I felt like I didn't know her anymore. What had happened here? I heard some people talking in the store. I said tentatively. They said something was coming? "Something is coming. Don't go outside, okay?" She shuffled from the kitchen, leaving me to finish cooking dinner by myself. The sun was setting by the time we sat down to eat. It was a tense, quiet meal, and I spent most of it deliberating on how I bring up the delicate subject of asking what happened between her and Daniel. I'd finally settled on just ripping the Band-Aid off and coming right out and asking when I heard a sound from outside. Alice heard it too, but she froze in place. She stared straight ahead at the wall, her face pale and her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. There were footsteps outside. I rose from my chair, turned the window, and gently parted the blinds. There was movement outside and the shine of inky black eyes, and Alice lunged out her seat. She hit the table in her haste, knocking the plates awry, and some silverware clattered to the floor. Startled, I took a step back, and Alice stumbled to fill the void I'd just left. She slapped her hands over blinds, holding them in place. Her breath came in short, frightened hiccups. "Don't," she gasped. "You can't look." "Alice, what is going on? I can't even look outside now. And where is Daniel? You keep avoiding giving me straight answers about where he's at." "I can't." "I'm sorry, Tabitha. I just didn't want to be alone. It's been a year dash." She crumpled into her seat, sobbing. I seized the opportunity and parted the blinds again just enough for a quick look outside. Elk. A herd of elk were shambling past, walking slowly through the trees behind the house. A large herd, arrayed in a long line. It reminded me of train cars. Their fur was ragged and bare in spots. Their ribs showed underneath their coats. They walked with their heads drooping and their eyes shone in the moonlight. I dropped the blinds and sat down next to my weeping friend. "It's been a year since what?" I asked. "Since Daniel left." I know how that sounds, but it wasn't his fault. They called to him. That's why we can't go outside. I looked outside just now. The only thing out there are some elk. She went pale. She grabbed my hands with her own, squeezing them tight. Her watery gaze sought my eyes and held them. Her pupils were dilated with fear. "You didn't hear anything, did you?" she whispered. "No, I hadn't. It was just some elk." But Alice wouldn't calm down, not even with my reassurances. They come every year, she continued. The lost herd, from before we were here, building our houses, pushing them out. That's what the locals told me when we moved here. They walk from one end of the continent to the other, back and forth, over the course of the year. The cashier closing all the blinds in the store. Alice's own shuttered house. Her insistence on not going outside. Alice, I ventured, what is wrong with the elk? Why does everyone seem scared of them? It's a long way to travel. So long. And they have to replenish their numbers. She took a deep breath. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked you to come. I just didn't want to be alone. A horrible thought was dawning in my head. My friend wasn't acting like someone that was going through a messy divorce. She was grieving, and this was the anniversary of whatever had happened to Daniel. I asked her if he was gone. Daniel, if he was never coming back. No, she said, her voice devoid of emotion, her eyes staring past me toward whatever lay on the other side of the wall. He came back. He's outside, with the elk. My heart hammered in my chest. None of this made any sense. It couldn't make sense. But something truly terrible had happened to my friend there, alone in that house with her. I was starting to wonder if maybe there really was a reason no one in this town would look outside right now. Are you saying if I go and look again, I'll see Daniel out there with that herd? But Alice was no longer listening to me. She rocked subtly back and forth, whispering to herself. They have to replenish their numbers. I went to the door, leading to the back porch. I shoved aside the drapes. The herd was continuing to walk past in slow, even paces. Some of them were shaped oddly, I realized. Their shoulders were positioned higher than their haunches, and their necks were too short. Their fur hadn't grown in fully, and pink skin showed in large patches along their flanks and bellies. Then one of them turned its head sideways. It stopped in its march and stared directly at me. A human face, human eyes, human hands, curling hoof fingers into the dirt, human skin, where the fur hadn't grown out yet. A face I saw staring at me from the photos on the walls and the mantle. Daniel. I was looking at Daniel. He opened his mouth, and what came out wasn't quite the moan of an elk, but neither was it fully formed words. Yet underneath the indistinguishable garble was a meaning, one meant for me, one I understood. Come. My body was moving of its own volition. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I began to panic. This wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want to go out there with those elk, and whatever Daniel had become was becoming. Yet all of that was buried under a need, an impulse rooted so deep in the rock and soil, I might as well have been trying to stop the rotation of the earth. It was like the will of the trees and the sky and the mountains around us was bearing down on me, crushing my will until nothing remained in myself except that one irrefutable command. Come. I fumbled with the lock for the sliding glass door. My hand was on the handle, about to wrench it open. My heart beat like a bird's wing, rejoicing. I was going. I would go with them. I'd walk and walk to the ocean and back, again and again, and that was right, and it was what I was meant to do. Then Alice hit me in the back of the head with a chair. I only remember fragments of what happened next as I faded in and out of consciousness. Alice stepping over me and opening the sliding glass door. Her crying had stopped, and she walked with her shoulders back and her spine straight. It was the first time I'd seen her walk with confidence since I'd arrived. Alice, in the yard, walking with her hand on Daniel's back. Alice, turning to face him, standing on tiptoes, her face raised to kiss him. Alice falling in line with the elk, taking her place behind Daniel, walking away. Then when I next woke up, they were gone and the yard was empty and quiet. I didn't know how long I'd been unconscious, but dinner was completely cold by then. The elk had left, continuing their death march to the ocean where they'd turn around and walk all the way back into the other ocean, again and again, until they dropped of exhaustion and called someone else to replenish their numbers. 2 days ago, on the anniversary of Alice's disappearance, I returned to Colorado. I rented a cabin, and when the employee gave me the key, he warned me not to bother the elk. Leave the blinds closed, he said. I promised I would. That night, I prepared myself. I put on a climbing harness. I tied rope between myself and several points throughout the cabin. The stove, the bed, anything that looked too heavy for me to drag with my own strength. Then, secure like the sailors of old, lashed to the wheel to combat the siren's call. I waited. They came. I heard the stamp of their hooves as they passed by. The blinds were up and the curtains were open so that I could see them clearly through the window. They shuffled by, sickly and starved, unable to stop on their endless march. I saw Daniel. His human face was gone, and his hands had become hooves. Only a few patches of pink skin remained to betray the human he'd once been. Behind him walked Alice. Her human eyes were tired in her sunken face. Her human hands were cracked and coated with dry blood. Her gait was lopsided, as her hind legs weren't the same length yet, and behind her walked their child. Fully elk, for sleek over its thin body. It turned its head and looked at me, opened its mouth and bleated. "Come," it said, "come." Story 2. I used to think nightmares ended when you woke up. I woke one morning drenched in sweat, my heart hammering against my ribs like I'd been running for my life. But I hadn't moved. My skin felt wrong, not just clammy, wrong, like it didn't belong to me anymore. Even the sheet on my chest fell off, heavy, like it was trying to hold me down. I lay still, listening to my ragged breathing, and then I heard another, softer, slower. Not mine. I froze. The ceiling above me didn't move, but I could feel it watching. Then the room began to change. It started in the corners, blurring, softening, like heat rising off asphalt. My chest tightened. I couldn't tell if I was waking up or slipping away. And then I wasn't in my room anymore. I didn't blink. I didn't black out. I just wasn't there. The darkness, I landed and wasn't empty. It was aware. It knew me. I felt it crawling over my thoughts, peeling back memories I thought I buried forever. Then the smell hit, sweet, rotting, like overripe fruit baking in the sun. My stomach lurched, and something thick rose in my throat. I turned to spit, but there was no floor. Maybe there wasn't even a me. Then I started to fall, not down, in. I landed on something wet, warm, and beating. A heart. Something unseen moved over me. Through me, not bugs. Thoughts. Thoughts that weren't mine. They slid into my head and sifted through my memories, touching every cruelty, every regret I thought I'd forgiven myself for. Whispers rose all around me. Not words, intent. Then the black rain started. Slow, syrupy drops that went through my skin, nesting in me. I tried to scream, but only static came out. I thought, this must be death. Then another thought, no, this is worse. A voice bloomed inside my skull, soft and certain. Wake up. And I did. I bolted upright. Gasping, my lungs burned. The ceiling fan spun lazily above me. Sunlight leaking through the window, but everything felt off. The air too thin. The light too flat. Hours later, I saw the scratches on my ankle. Thin, deliberate, not bleeding. A reminder. In the bathroom mirror, my reflection seemed delayed. My eyes were shadowed, sunken, and there was a dark smear beneath one that wouldn't wash away. When I stepped back into the bedroom, my foot landed near something wet. A small, bare footprint. Not mine. Then the smell returned, sweet, spoiled. I don't really sleep now. I lie in bed staring at the ceiling I don't trust. The corners stretch if I blink too long. Sometimes the fan slows. Sometimes I hear that second breath. And sometimes I don't remember lying down at all. Every morning I ask myself the same thing. Was it real? And every morning, something inside me waits too long to answer. One night, I hovered. My body refused to move. The walls pulsed with a heartbeat that wasn't mine. Around 3 a.m., I blinked, and the room blinked back. Then I was gone. No falling. No flying. Just nowhere. Weightless. Gray. My body and memory. Then the screaming started. Far away but endless. 1,000 voices overlapping like a choir underwater. I knew them. All of them. They were mine. different ages, different mistakes. Moments I thought I'd buried. A figure appeared, tall, flickering at the edges. No face, no eyes, just attention. It didn't walk. It didn't float. It just happened. Chains slid from its shape like unspooling memories. One brushed my arm, if I even had an arm, and I froze. Not from fear, from recognition. Stay. My own voice. When I woke again, the world was wrong. The mirror hesitated before following me. The floor curved at the edges. My shadow leaned toward me. I dropped a mug just to see it shatter. It didn't. It sank. The hallway stretched too far. The front door kept retreating. I understood then. I wasn't dreaming. I was drifting. This time, I didn't fall. I arrived. A field. Empty yet alive. Memories sprouted from the dirt. Scarecrows with my face bent toward me. Their straw-stuffed mouths whispering my own regrets. The sky cracked. The figure stepped through. Chains twitching like they were eager to hold me. It didn't look at me. It didn't need to. You never left, it said, in a voice I'd once loved. And I believed it. The chain wrapped around my chest, cold and familiar. The world folded. Now I waked to darkness. No ceiling, no room, just the echo of someone I used to be. A single pinprick of light hovers far above, like a thought I can't reach. My scream spirals inward, joining the others. Yes, the others. Versions of me. People I loved. People I feared. Suspended. Remembering. We wait. And sometimes, when the veil goes thin, when the world blinks wrong, we reach through. We borrow your eyes. We borrow your dreams. And we wait. Story 3. Angel in the Attic. At dinner, my sister Lindsay excitedly told us about the angel in the attic. We grew up in a religious family, so it wasn't too weird that her imaginary friend would be of the biblical variety. She was 8 at the time, making me 15. 5 years ago, we were at my mom's sister's, Aunt Margaret, visiting for the summer. Aunt Margaret's house might be considered a mansion by some. Rooms upon rooms, 3 stories tall. Entering through the main door, you're greeted with a wide, curving staircase that leads to the second floor, which holds 6 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a sunroom. Behind the staircase, the main floor, a kitchen, 2 sitting rooms, a game room, dining room, and yet another sunroom. The 3rd floor, accessed by a tight, almost vertical staircase, was basically just the attic, one expansive open room above the rest of the house. Lindsay had been spending her days exploring the house, her favorite room being the attic. At dinner, though, I remember her saying, "I thought angels were supposed to be pretty." And Mom replied, "Do you remember Zechariah? He was terrified when he saw an angel." My sister nodded knowingly at that. It was very scary at first, but only for a little bit. Mom and Aunt Margaret smiled at her, but I thought it was so odd. Why would a kid purposely make up scary things? The next day, she disappeared again to explore. We didn't think much of it until it was dinner, and she still hadn't turned up. We began looking through the rooms, calling out for her. Eventually, we ended up at the attic stairs, and there she was, curled up at the bottom, silently crying. Mom swept her up and brought her downstairs, where we tried everything we could to console her. She calmed down, but still wouldn't tell us what happened. She wouldn't tell us anything. She couldn't, I guess. For the past 5 years, she hasn't spoken a word. There have been so many doctors and therapists, appointment after appointment, never leading to any answers. No one could give us an actual reason for this. And Lindsay wouldn't explain either, not in writing anyways. I'm not sure she even knew why she couldn't talk. The 3 of us made an unspoken agreement to never return to Aunt Margaret's, though, until Aunt Margaret died last week, and Mom somehow ended up being the one in charge of her estate. So back we went, just Mom and I. Lindsay refused to go, and who could blame her? The house felt so heavy when we arrived. My aunt had started staying on the main floor, so only a few rooms had seen any life. Everywhere else covered in dust, all the curtains tightly closed. We thought it'd be easier to share a room, so we found the cleanest one and got it ready. Fresh sheets and an open window instantly improved the conditions, so you almost forgot about the musty and oppressive state of the rest of the house. Exhausted from traveling, we both slept hard that night. In the light of the new day, we found ourselves emboldened and ended up at the attic steps. We stood there for a few minutes, Mom looking up the staircase, me watching her. We could be here all day. So I went around her and began going up. She followed closely behind me. The stairs creaked with each footfall, moaning under our weight, warning us. As we crested the top, we could see there was nothing except boxes and old furniture covered in more dust than the downstairs. A few boarded up windows provided enough light to see and walk through, not really sure what we were looking for. A box of old books, my grandmother's dresser, someone's coin collection, a mix of feeling at ease and disappointed. We still couldn't find an explanation for my sister's condition. There was nothing worthwhile. We decided to go back down and start on the main floor, sorting Aunt Margaret's belongings into keep or donate boxes. I was distracted. There was something about the attic, something up there that had answers, and I needed to find it. I waited until Mom fell asleep that night before trying to go back. I slipped out of bed and made my way through the winding halls. I had my phone's light, but it only uncovered a few steps ahead of me. At the staircase, I paused, looking up the narrow corridor. There was some other light on up there, illuminating the top of the stairs and the landing. With each step I took, I felt calmer, more sure of myself, and as I stepped into the glow, a warm feeling washed over me. It was so comforting. I saw a figure in front of one of the windows, halfway across the room. The light seemed to be emanating out from them. I was alarmed. Someone had broken in, but that feeling quickly subsided and gave way to peace. No, they were supposed to be here, and it was okay. My body began moving on its own toward the figure. I was in control, but I didn't care. Its back was to me, and as I drew closer, I could see through the glow. A gray robe draped over it, the sleeves as long as the bottom brushing against the floor. They turned to me then, the hood cascading around their face like hair, the robe swishing fluidly, like it was more than clothes, like it was part of them. The face, oh the face, like a blank canvas, the same pale gray stretched in over a long and narrow frame. The piece of me still conscious wanted to scream, but my legs kept moving forward, my arms reaching out. The figure opened its own arms, embracing me, folding me into the fabric of itself, swallowing me. I welcomed it, a warmth spread throughout my body, and I let myself sink in. I'd never felt so safe, so happy, so loved. But as my limbs grew lighter, like I was floating, the warmth turned to burning. I couldn't feel anything except heat and my lungs constricting, and somehow I pushed myself back into my body, back in control. I tore myself free from its grasp and stumbled backwards. I was previously floating, and now it was like I had been slammed into the ground. I was clumsy and struggling to make myself move how I wanted. Every step, every breath hurt, and my vision was blacking out. I thought I was at the stairs, and I reached out to grab the wall, but there was nothing except air. I lost my balance and began falling for real, crashing down the stairs and landing hard on my back. Then darkness and floating again. When I woke back up, Mom was standing over me, stroking my hair. I realized we were in the hospital. When she saw my eyes open, she cried out, and tears began falling down her face, landing on my own. I tried saying something. I wanted to ask what was happening, but my throat tightened. Nothing came out. I couldn't speak. Story 4. There's not always a twist. This book sucks. My younger sister hurls, quite literally hurls, a copy of Wuthering Heights across the kitchen at the opposite wall. It lands with its pages splayed. Frankie, I scold. I've tried to teach my sister to control her temper, but she's been bombastic since our parents disappeared 2 years ago. Ever since then, I've done my best to take care of her. Sort of a Lilo and Stitch situation, minus Hawaii. What? She asks. It sucked. There was no plot twist. We don't treat books like that. I thought it was going to be like Jane Eyre with some sort of surprise ending. This one was all boring though. There's not always a twist. I picked the book off the floor and flipped through the pages to make sure none of them are torn. Hang on, where'd you get this? Ms. Gina. Frankie shrugs. Our next door neighbor. She's been letting me go over after school and borrow some of her old books. I flipped to the front page out of curiosity. There's a signature, Bronte. Wait, I think this is a first edition. Probably. She says she bought it when it first came out. That can't be possible. Ms. Gina would have to be like 300. She's old. She's probably just forgetting things. Frankie shrugs again and marches for her room. Either way, the book was trash. The next few weeks, Frankie keeps going to Ms. Gina's after school. I'm glad for it. I'm always exhausted after working 12-hour overnight shifts to support us. And it's good for Frankie to have another positive adult in her life that isn't her older sister. Ms. Gina's been our kindly, elderly neighbor for years, since even before my parents disappeared. On one of the rare days I wake up before the evening, I see Ms. Gina working in her garden. It's odd. The day is sweltering, but she has a long-sleeved jacket pulled all the way over her neck and a hood shadowing her face. Need help? I call out. She turns to me, shielding her eyes with her gloved hands. No, that's all right, dearie. Ms. Gina returns to yanking out blood-red beets from the ground. I tip my sun hat at her and continue on my walk. Old people and their odd internal temperatures. I start trying to wake up early and see Frankie in the evenings. Kids her age have started going missing in surrounding towns recently, and I want to make sure she feels safe. After a few days of this, I start to notice how calm she's been recently. Her explosions come less. She's mellowing out, maturing. Maybe her afternoons with Ms. Gina are helping? Except is it that she's maturing, or is she just more tired? Her complexion is turning more pale and sickly by the day. Her usual girlish energy is dimming to fatigue, and she wears more and more black. Are you fine? I asked her one day. I haven't been sleeping well. I probably have insomnia. Maybe start taking naps after school? Skip going to Ms. Gina's? But I like visiting her. I know, but act. Frankie shrieks and slams her bedroom door on me. Fine. I don't have to be her parent all the time. I can let her make her own decisions. Don't be paranoid. I tell myself day after day. But then one night, we're eating takeout, and I notice something on her neck. A set of 2 small cuts just above her collarbone. Scabbed over but still fresh. Instinctively, I reach for them, but she jerks away and glares. What are those? I ask. Nothing. I raise my eyebrows and she huffs. Fine, she says. My friend thought it would be funny to try stapling my neck in class. That's it. Stop worrying. Okay, I say. But the next day after work, I make a stop before going home. I knock on Ms. Gina's door in the middle of the afternoon. Hello, darling, she says. The lights are out in her living room. My heart pounds. Can I come in? I have something for you. Oh, it's just I'm not really in a state to entertain guests at the moment. Just for a second. Well, all right then. I suppose that would be the polite thing. She turns away as if to survey her disorganized entryway. Soundlessly, I slip the wooden stake from its hiding spot in my sleeve, raise it above my head, and step over the threshold. Ms. Gina turns back to me. Her forehead collides with a head-level coat rack jutting from the wall. Oh! She reaches her hand up to the gash in her forehead, and it comes away shining with blood. Human blood. I feel ridiculous. Frankie really does just have insomnia. Her dumb friend really did just try to staple her neck. After Ms. Gina has bandaged herself and apologized profusely that she can't have me inside right now, she bids me farewell at the entryway. Sincerest apologies. But come back anytime, and what was it you said you had for me? This. I hand her the copy of Wuthering Heights. It's been on our counter for ages, but I think it's yours. Frankie wasn't the biggest fan, actually. She said she wanted a surprise at the end. There's not always a twist, my neighbor informs me. There isn't. It's only later that night, when Frankie is dead asleep and the shorthand is nearing the 3 mark, that I finally slink from my bed. I slip through Miss Gina's unlocked window, sink my teeth into her sleeping neck, and suck her dry just like I did to my parents. In the quiet of her room, I wipe my mouth in satisfaction, but sometimes there is... Story 5. The thing that stole my father's face. The thing that stole my father's face seems happy this week. It steals a lot, and the things it has decided to take are bizarre. I've started keeping a list. So far, in addition to my father's face, the thing has stolen the concept of a beach vacation, heavy metal magazines, various sports team baseball caps, vintage comic books, encounters with an old friend at the grocery store, bartender tips, a jar of Jif peanut butter, a pocket Bible, button-down Spider-Man shirts, the show Supernatural, a song sung especially for me as a child. At first, I tried to talk to the thing that stole my father's face, but it can only mimic superficial things about my father. If you press it, push it, try to get a real conversation out of it, demanding to know what it's done to your father, for example, it just shuts down. After staring at you blankly for a few moments, it will open its mouth and pop out something Dad says. Kind of like how Woody from Toy Story has a few catchphrases when you pull his cord. Classic, familiar phrases, but there is no real substance to it. I won't lie, it is terrifying. I seem to be the only one who has clocked that something is wrong. I have very, very carefully brought up my concerns to my closest family, knowing I must sound insane. My uncle gently recommended I see a therapist. Everyone else thinks my father is alive and well, but only I know the truth, he is dead. And something sinister is walking the earth, living his life, wearing his face. I've tried to live my own life as if this isn't happening. I stopped talking to the thing and blocked its number. It wants to talk to me apparently. I had to block it on socials too, because it was liking my posts and updating my dad's YouTube channel with 3-minute movie reviews. The notifications make me nauseous. It's been 6 months, and I'm still waiting for something to happen. I have nightmares about it. In them, I see something horrible crawl from my father's mouth. This is the moment, the transformation. I feel sick. I scream at him. I accuse my father. He must have let the thing in, wanted it somehow. He is responsible. In the dream, I am certain of this, and the weight of the truth is unbearable. My father willingly gave himself up. There is only my father's expressionless face as I beg for him to say something, to explain why he did it. And then I wake up. But nothing in my waking life has happened. Nothing sinister. I can point to prove to everyone that the thing isn't be trusted, that it's not my dad. Now we're in a weird limbo, me and the thing. I don't know what to do. For now I keep my distance, and that doesn't seem to bother it. I wonder what its goal is, what it may do to my family, what it may do to the world. Story 6. I recently found a trail cam in my grandfather's old house. What contained forever changed my perception of nature's laws. I live in a tiny town in rural Pennsylvania, tucked deep in the Appalachian foothills. The kind of place where you wave at every car that passes and never bother locking your front door. I grew up here, left for college, and then, like a fool, came back. I inherited my grandfather's old cabin after he passed last fall. It's miles from the nearest neighbor, surrounded by nothing but forest. I moved in to clear my head and reconnect with nature, as my therapist said. 2 weeks ago, I noticed something strange. The woods went quiet. No birds, no crickets, just dead air. At first, I chalked it up to the weather, maybe a predator in the area, but it didn't go away. Then my dog, Maggie, started acting weird. She'd growl at the tree line, hair bristled, tail between her legs. One night, she refused to go outside at all, whimpering and hiding behind the couch. I figured I'd catch whatever was on a trail cam, so I set one up about 50 yards into the woods behind the cabin, facing a game trail my grandfather used to hunt. I checked the footage the next morning. The camera had gone off around 2:13 a.m. I scrolled through raccoons, deer, then a figure. Pale, hairless, human-shaped but twisted. It crawled on all fours, with arms too long and legs bent the wrong way. The eyes reflected like an animal's, bright and emotionless. It looked directly at the camera, then smiled. I slammed my laptop shut. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. 3 nights ago, I woke up to Maggie growling again. Low and deep, I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The woods were still dead quiet. I scanned the trees. Nothing. I was about to go back inside when I saw it. Something moved, crawling just at the edge of the light. Fast, jerky, like a spider learning to walk on human limbs. It vanished behind a tree. I ran back inside, locked the door, and nailed a chair under the handle. Maggie barked once, then whimpered and hid. The next morning, I found claw marks on the back door. Deep, 3-pronged scratches, as if something had tested the wood. The trail cam was gone, just ripped off the tree. No sign of it anywhere. Then that afternoon, I drove into town and told the game warden. He laughed, said it was probably a bear or a sick coyote. But bears don't smile for the camera. But some part of me wanted to believe that was what I saw. Last night, it came back. I didn't see it. I heard it. Around 2 a.m., scratching at the windows. Light, deliberate. Then came the whispering. Not words I could understand. Just noise. Like someone trying to mimic human speech through a throat not meant for it. I stayed frozen in bed, shotgun on my lap, until sunrise. I'm leaving today. I've packed everything I can fit in my truck. I don't care if the cabin burns to the ground. But before I go, I have to post this, because I checked my grandfather's old journals this morning. He knew. He wrote about it, called it the Pale One, or sometimes just him. Said has been watching the house since near the end of 1983. The entry said it never came inside, as long as the doors stayed locked and the woods were respected. Then I flipped to the final page of the journal. The last entry, dated May 17, 1996, just said, "If you hear him whisper, don't listen. If you see him smile, run. And if you ever find a camera, destroy it." I've destroyed the camera, but one very confusing thing keeps happening. Every night, instead of my dog barking into the vast emptiness of surrounding wilderness, she growls and yelps while staring directly at my cellar door. Story 7. Since 1976, 98% of babies have been born with a sixth sense. It has become the new normal state of the human. The parietal implant surgery should help me become normal. I am one of the unlucky ones. I spent every moment among Abel with this crippling feeling of unbelonging. Sure, I had friends in my senseless community. It was not enough, and maybe it was ungrateful of me. I couldn't contain this urge to be normal. Connecting to the deepest level, seeing more than on the surface, such a mundane thing for normal people. They would pity me for the lack of something I couldn't even comprehend. Endless ruminations of my mind were taking turns with a boring reality I had as a life. My sleepy older brother mumbled through the yawn. "Sun is sure grumpy today, isn't it?" What a typical way to describe weather for the able ones. Seems just as usual warm today to me. A little cloudy, maybe. I replied with disinterest. My brother gave me an encouraging pat on the shoulder and said, "I'm sure the parietal implant will give you everything you need." The evening before the surgery, I couldn't brush off the uneasiness. The charming smell of Bascoro's dinner was my only distraction. Almost everyone would support my decision to get the parietal implant. It was recently patented and vigorously tested in private experiments, but not yet widespread for public, though Bascoro would still be concerned about unnecessary risks. It was his last chance to change my mind. It's going to be all right. I was waiting for this for so long. I can't just drop it, I argued. "It is never too late," he said and let out a sigh. "Sometimes it's hard to abandon your commitment, but are you truly sure if it is worth it?" I didn't say anything. He knew I had already made up my mind. "Oh, It is ultimately your choice, he added, staring into the window. I didn't have to see his face to know he had that grumpy look. I wanted to see it through. It was chilling to my bone marrow. I wanted to know the truth. I was meant to feel what I was ripped off from my birth. 20 years. I had spent 20 years of my life looking for patterns in these glances, and I failed to see any, as if sixth sense perception was so deeply embedded in every moment of your life, you can't pinpoint what makes it normal, different from mine. I can admit that bitter envy is clouding my judgment, but if I don't see it through, then I will spend my years with doubts and regret. In the hospital's corridor, I heard a child's cry, which is common for sterile white rooms smelling of alcohol. A girl's parents were trying to soothe her as she left the cabinet, rubbing her temples. Getting used to something entirely new cannot be easy. Though, the younger the patients are, the bigger are the chances of success. It'll get better in just a couple of hours. The familiar voice of my doctor rang through the door. It opened with an inviting creak. He picked up a new pair of gloves and put them on with a loud pop of plastic in preparation for testing my senses. The flashlight checked my vision. Common odors like coffee tested my sense of smell, and some other trials were commenced for taste, hearing, and skin touch. Following the final check before the procedure, the swirls of excitement and anxiety were drowning me, and my thoughts were rushing, failing to anchor to anything calming. Anesthesia finally let me have just a moment of peace. My memories after that were fuzzy in an odd order. I woke up in what felt like only a second of restless sleep. To my surprise, I felt only a little bit of nagging pain. I couldn't form any thoughts, and in that state, they let me rest. I was disturbed by my doctor after 2 hours of a feverish nap. "Time to test," he eagerly said, and got a triangle. Its metal glittered in the sun rays. Reflections were painfully blinding due to the headache. Time was moving so excruciatingly slow. I couldn't wait for my honor. The doctor hit the triangle with a stick. It was silent. I looked at the doctor in confusion, since I could hear steps behind the door and the wind outside. He stared into my eyes, searching for a result. I shifted uncomfortably in the chair. "I hear nothing from this triangle. Is that normal?" I asked with caution. He rubbed his chin. "That is unusual, but not unheard of. Did you ever feel the sixth sense indirectly through other basic five senses? For example, blind can dream visually and discern light from darkness. Even if I did, I won't be able to say specifically what." I replied, "Well, as you've been told already, the implant truly doesn't give you the sense. It helps you create new neural paths in your brain, so it can imitate the feeling for you. Not only might take a while to get used to it, but I'm very sorry to say, in your case it is possible that it won't be as effective as it was expected to be at first. But we will see." I swallowed to ease a dry throat. There was a weird mix of relief and disappointment in my stomach. I knew about this possibility already, but it should have been enough to finally blend in, though, and I couldn't tell if it was my imagination. I could almost feel the neuron paths being generated as the new information that I couldn't discern yet is being processed. The pain was minor. It was lingering in the background of my conscience. I finished dealing with the documents and the scheduling of the next checkup, and went outside under a dense barrage of clouds. I could see the spots of light and shadows running on the asphalt, as clouds were passing by with immense speed. Not sure what got into me when I rushed under cover of a cafe to avoid another trail of sun, just like when I was a kid messing around outdoors. When I could see clouds last enough to cover me all the way through to my home, I was relieved to get proper rest back home. It was barely 4 p.m. when I dropped onto my bed and fell asleep in an instant. I hoped I would sleep as if knocked out, but my dreams were a mess of unintelligible shapes and sounds. I felt so hot and uncomfortable. Delirium visions were afflicting my restless sleep. No position was right. No pillow was soft. Viscous fake awakenings were taking turns with vexing terrors. Scorching pain hit my ears. A roaring scream was tearing my mind apart. I jolted out of bed and everything was rolling before my eyes as I was trying to find balance under unending torture. The screeching was unbearable. It took seconds, a negligible amount usually, but painfully long in this moment, to get a hold of the situation and shut my ears with palms. It didn't get any quieter. My wide open eyes looked around in despair. Where is this torturous sound coming from? And why can I not possibly block it out even slightly? Sweat was covering my neck as I was panting from excruciating pain. Still helplessly holding my hands on my ears in lack of anything else I could do, headache was pulsating in my head, as if drills were rearranging my brain matter with each thrust of pain. I crawled whimpering to the corner of the room, trying to curl up in an embryo pose. My human intelligence regressed to the basic existence of a primitive creature that could feel nothing but this unending pain. My mind was blank for an unknown amount of time, and slowly, without being conscious about it, I came to my senses, and it was finally quiet. My body felt frozen, and it was scary to move. Almost a slight flick of a finger would bring torture back. I slowly opened my eyes and cautiously sat down, trying to process what had happened. One thing was clear. The scream I supposedly heard wasn't a sound. My thoughts were like lazy flies rumbling, trying to get a hold of the whole picture. My mind felt like a sore body on the next day of the most extensive exercise. I felt somewhat like an animal that barely escaped a predator. Yet, it was lurking. I had to think fast. Maybe it was some sort of case of synesthesia, an anomalous blending of the senses. Exactly. This is what the doctor was talking about, experiencing something through another sense. I rubbed my temple that was yet to completely recover from anesthesia. What input could make me hear such an awful noise? I got up on my legs, slightly shaking. I felt utterly pale and exhausted even though I had just woken up. I sighed and calmed down. It was morning and the sun was leaving stripes on the floor and my bed through the curtains. I walked to the window to close them and hoped to resume my sleep and to deal with whatever that was later. I reached out and sun rays hit my finger. A scream put sharp claws around my mind. I froze and gasped. Sounds were racing through my head. My thoughts were reduced to screaming once more. 2 seconds later, I flicked away like from a burning stove in pain. The sun. I heard the sun. Third, eyes opened just to be met with blinding pain. I kneeled so I wouldn't be hit by sun rays, and my trembling hand closed the curtain with a struggle because of an uncomfortable angle. I collapsed right there on the floor under the windowsill. I was taking deep, comforting breaths, trying to sort out what had happened, what I felt. I clutched my finger in the palm, and instead of burning sensation, I heard echoes of the voices from far away. I came to the conclusion that the curtains were possibly moved by wind, and sun hit my face through the opening. This is what caused me immense torture. Does everyone with sixth sense feel the sun the same way, or have I had an unsuccessful procedure with terrible complications? Truly, able people are happy under the sun. They cherish it and share it with each other. One thing is certain. I need to get it fixed. I cannot imagine living avoiding the sun like some sort of vampire. Some legend might come after me and kill me in my sleep. I got up and started changing for an emergency doctor's visit. Danger wasn't immediate, and I wasn't sure if I could explain myself without being sent to a psychiatrist checkup. And so, I couldn't call an ambulance. I picked up my phone and stared at the screen with a few concerned messages from friends and family. What should I say? I was really insistent on getting this implant. It feels embarrassing to admit it wasn't a great idea after all. I decided to put off worrying everyone until I'm sure it is serious and long-term. I copy-pasted, "I'm doing good, resting, getting a checkup today. Thanks for the concern," with slight changes to each person depending on my relationship with them. I put the phone down and started brainstorming how to cover all of my skin. I put on long clothes and gloves. At first, I thought that an umbrella should cover my face and neck, but the possibility of pain hit me like a whip. A vivid memory from long ago made me shudder. Once reflected light in my car's mirror hit me in the eyes, and it almost made me lose control of the vehicle. An umbrella is not safe enough. Is it appropriate in this situation to dress like I'm actually invisible? I bandaged my face, put a scarf around my neck, and put sunglasses on. During that, I received a call on my phone and struggled to accept the call both mentally and physically. Physically, because the touch screen is not responsive enough to my gloves material, and mentally because it was Bascoro. "Hi, how are you?" I tried to speak as nonchalantly as possible. "Are you alright? The text you sent was weird," he deadpanned. I panicked almost audibly. I couldn't possibly guess his reaction, besides most likely justified scolding. "Yeah, everything is good. I'm going to the doctor right now for a checkup," I replied, with hopes my voice wasn't shaking. "All right, I'll be right there." Before I could even protest, he ended the call. You can't escape the inevitable. I was never so anxious about going outside before. When I opened the door to the street fully bright from sunlight, I was covered in goosebumps. There was no open skin. First step out. I became aware of the sun rays trying to penetrate through the pores of my clothes, but even if they were reaching anywhere, thankfully, I could barely feel it. If I heard something unusual, I could mix it up with the city noise. I was completely focused on the road, ignoring glances from passers-by. When I finally entered the clinic, Baskor was already there. He was talking to a nurse, and she was visibly giving him a cold shoulder. I approached him carefully, trying to think of how to explain myself. Confusion and concern appeared at his usually steady face. "What happened?" he said with an indiscernible tone. I felt like something was stuck in my throat and realized I was on the verge of crying. If I say anything, absolutely anything, I would just burst down. "Hey, come here," he whispered softly as he slightly squeezed my arm to leave me to sit on the couch. He tried to look into my eyes through the dark lenses of my sunglasses. "What happened, Lees?" I felt as if I lost something important, a connection with people I've already had. And now, I'm stuck in this limbo between abled and senseless. I cried my heart out without saying anything. He waited for me to be able to talk. I took my glasses off since they were collecting tears, and removed bandages from my mouth. I kept stuttering as he was patiently looking at me. I don't know. Something went terribly wrong and I was in so much pain because I took a raspy breath. I heard the sun. I looked down at my shoes expecting a response, but he was waiting for me to continue. "You are not going to lecture me? You were mad at me, weren't you? Since I told you about my plans, and you were right all along." He snorted. "Why are you hurting so much? You had no idea this could possibly happen." "Thank you," I said with a barely intelligible and trembling voice. "Thank me later when I'll make this place fix this nonsense." A mean-looking nurse heard me out while barely paying attention. She glanced at me with a mix of annoyance and disturbance. She took my measurements, suddenly swore, and walked off in a rush. I felt myself going increasingly pale. I was furious. The adult patients that were permitted to have experimental implants were possessing some sort of a curious pair of genes. One that would allow the sharpest sixth sense, and one that would apparently cause loss of sixth sense at the same time. Scientists wanted to find out why. The procedure was an enormous success, even if you don't agree with me right now. No, even if I removed the implant, neurons' connections have already been established. So you would keep your sixth sense. It has heightened activity and sensitivity compared to the general population. You should feel privileged and grateful. You might need to reassess your religion and your place here. What? I was baffled. Not to be disrespectful, but how is religion relevant here? Your attitude is a reason why it is so painful. Sun imagery is everywhere in human history and religion. Saints' halos, personification of the sun, rituals and dances. What is a sun but not a god? Powerful beyond comprehension. In size so unimaginably enormous, yet so far away out of human grasp. It will blind you if you dare look at it. It is life, it is death. It is a gentle touch of warmth and unbearable scorching heat. It can disappear to our doom at any moment, and it wouldn't be to anyone's surprise. Sun is not sentient, I said with a shaking voice. Do you think something capable of communication is not sentient? You spent your life in darkness, deaf to the call. People pitied you for your overwhelming ignorance. And now you want to go back to your intoxicating foolishness? Too late. Accept the gift and pray to listen closely to the sun. My blessing, my curse. I always hear it now. It is loud during the day when the sun is looming over my existence. It is quiet at night, where the moon is a pathetic reflection of the sun's light in its absence. I was going through life, oblivious to the overwhelming presence of the star. Everything I hear, feel, think is touched by the sun. It is an absolute peak of sun activity in its current 11-year cycle, and the highest peak since 1976. Story 8. If you ever get a call at 3:17 a.m., answer it. And please believe what they're saying. For the first time in my life, I was finally happy. Well, I was until this week, when the phone rang for the first time. I was asleep next to my boyfriend. Let's call him Ryan. Ryan was the sweetest and most caring man in the world. He would do anything for me, and I would do anything for him. But that all changed that night. I woke up to the phone ringing. I was barely awake, and I could only just manage to open my eyes slightly. Through the slight gap, I saw it was 3:17 a.m. Who the hell is calling me at this time of night? It must be something bad, I thought whilst I reached over for my phone. Ryan hadn't moved. He must have been in a very deep sleep. I picked up the call and groggily said hello. Ryan has a second cell phone. It's hidden above the shower. Move the loose ceiling tile. You'll find it there. The voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it had a raspy quality to it. It certainly wasn't a voice of someone I knew, but I thought it must be a prank. However, before I could even respond, the anonymous caller cut the line dead. I sat there for a few moments, thinking this must be some kind of joke, but it wasn't funny. I didn't understand why someone would joke about that. If it was a friend, they know my past. They know I've been cheated on before, and it broke me. Some friend they are, if it is one of them. I decided I would go and check just for my peace of mind. There's no harm in checking, and if there isn't anything there, I could just go back to sleep and forget about the prank until tomorrow. I carefully got out of bed so as not to wake Ryan and crept over to the bathroom door. I had to stand on the edge of the bath to reach above the shower. But I found a loose tile and moved it. I reached up and felt around for something. I didn't find anything at first and felt a sense of relief wash over me. But then as I got round to the part just above my head, I felt the phone. My mind began racing. What was this doing here? Surely Ryan couldn't do this to me. Then my mind went back to the call. How could anyone even know this? Was a friend of Ryan's he had told about the phone, and they were warning me? I stepped down and turned the phone on. Luckily there was no lock. I swiped it open and went to messages. There were hundreds of messages dating back to over a year ago with someone called Jasmine. They had even mentioned me in the text. Carla's at it again. She's always trying to start arguments. Never leaves me alone. One text read, "You need to leave her, babe. I need you. I love you." I couldn't read anymore. Tears began to fill my eyes, and I could barely see anything. I was distraught. How could he do something like this to me? I ran to the bedroom, threw the phone at him, and started shouting. He had no remorse. He just asked how I knew about the phone. I kicked him out that night and told him never to come back. He took what he could and said he would come back for the rest later. I told him he would never step foot in this house again, and that I would mail his stuff to his new address. I called my sister, crying down the phone to her. She said she would come and stay with me a few nights in the guest bedroom. She came over and we watched a few films, drank some wine, and ordered takeout. It made me feel a bit better, but I was still devastated. I told Lauren that I was going to head up to bed around 11 p.m. I fell asleep quickly, probably the wine's doing. Then again, I was woken by the sound of my phone ringing on the bedside table. I was still a little drunk and had almost forgotten about the call the previous day. I told Lauren about it, but she was convinced it was one of Ryan's friends who felt guilty about knowing he was cheating. I picked up the phone and read the time. 3:17 a.m. shown on the screen, in big bold white letters. The same time as yesterday. I started to shake slightly, and I could feel my heart beating out of my chest. After what seemed like forever, I finally built up the courage to answer the call. "Hello," I said, stammering. For a second the line was silent. Then, in that quiet, raspy voice, the caller said, "He left something behind, on the floorboard, the third one from the wardrobe." The call ended. I called out to Lauren, but there was no answer. She must have fallen asleep on the couch downstairs. I paced around the room for a minute, thinking. I eventually went and got the flathead screwdriver from the bathroom and knelt down in front of the wardrobe and counted until the third floorboard. It came up easier than expected. There was a small bag in there. I grabbed the bag, put the floorboard back, put the screwdriver on the side table, and sat cross-legged on my bed. The bag contained an engagement ring, the one that Ryan had told me he was saving up for, the one he never got to give me. I looked at it in disgust, just thinking about what he had done to me. I was in the middle of cursing him out in my mind when a small USB flash drive fell out of the bag. I hadn't noticed it before. It was one of those mini ones. It read SanDisk 64 gigabytes on the side. Not that I really knew what that meant. I was curious about what could be on it. I thought it must be videos of him cheating on me with that girl he was texting. I loaded up my laptop and plugged the flash drive in. On it, there were folders with multiple girls' names on them. I opened the first one. What I found there horrified me. I can barely even write this without feeling the urge to vomit. It started off with pictures of the girls sleeping. In a few of them, he was holding a knife near their necks while they slept. There were hundreds of these photos of multiple different women, but the last photo of each of the folders was the same. The woman was laid naked on the bed, with her throat slit, covered in blood. In the corner, Ryan was standing there, with a sinister grin on his face, holding the knife. Every single one of these folders were the same, except mine. I felt nauseous. My head was pounding, and I felt like I was about to pass out. The man I loved was some kind of psychotic killer, and he was planning on doing the same to me. There were pictures of me sleeping and him holding the knife near me, just like all the rest of them. I was about to get out of bed and rush downstairs to Lauren, but I was stopped by the sound of my phone ringing. I looked at my phone bewildered. It read 3:17 a.m. and an unknown number was calling me. It made no sense how I checked the time before, and it said 3:17 a.m. I answered, still confused, and the same voice spoke to me again. "He's here. Ryan is downstairs. He's about to come up." The line cut off and I dropped my phone. I heard the creak of the stairs with each of his footsteps. I panicked, not knowing what to do. I looked around and realized I still had the screwdriver, so I grabbed it and hid behind the door. Ryan crept slowly and opened my door as quietly as he could. As he entered, I drove the screwdrivers hard as I could into his shoulder. He yelped in pain, but didn't go down like I thought he would. He grabbed me by the hair and threw me to the floor. I looked at his right hand and saw the long blade that would be the cause of my death. "You stupid bitch. Look what you've done, no. I should have killed you, BF Dash." Before I could continue on, Lauren had woken up from all the commotion. She had grabbed a knife from the kitchen and ran upstairs. She saw Ryan on top of me and pushed the knife straight into the back of Ryan's neck. He fell down with a thud, next to me with half of him falling on me. I pushed him off and leapt up and hugged Lauren, crying with relief. We called the police, and we were both taken to the station, where we were told Ryan was dead and that they would be looking into the women on the flash drive. That is where I am writing this from now. So if you ever get a phone call at 3:17 a.m. from an unknown number, please answer it, and please, for the love of God, do what it says. If I didn't, I would be just another victim on that sick man's flash drive. Story 9. You know what's worse than a ghost at your job? 2 ghosts at your job. Hope, I need you. What you need to do is forget my number. I didn't say that to my boss. Wanted to, but couldn't. If I weren't so lovely. I had about a dozen other words I desperately wanted to say to him. None of them will be polite to use in public. Some of them may include the location where he could stuff his head. "Danny," I said, my voice ratcheting up its natural southern drawl. "We've talked about this. You know I don't like opening alone. I get the frights." I really let Ian Frights walk him through the magnolias. Southern Bel-Angium into submission. Dropping and picking up my southern accent was a skill I developed as a kid of divorced parents. I lived in the South exclusively until I was 10. That was the year my parents split, and my dad moved back north to Michigan. Code switching between 2 unique cultures helped me fit in with both. After that, I shuffled between the North and the South more than a Civil War battalion. I keep my Dixie accent in check these days, unless using it will help me get what I want. A woman with a Southern accent can be catnip for a certain kind of man. I prayed Danny was one of them. "Those are just stories," he said. "No, sir, not just stories. The entire staff is afraid of the room." "Hope," he half said, half sighed. "You'll only be alone for 20 minutes. 30 tops. Damn it, he balked. The first salvo of my Southern Charm offensive failed. I rallied the troops and charged again. Captain, I said, blessing him with a nickname he didn't deserve, you know that place gives me the creeps when I'm alone. It plumb scares me to high heaven. Even I was repulsed by the Scarlett O'Hara Act. Just stay away from there, he said. Gene will be there too. Let him do it. That was hardly a relief. If it were Gene joining me for the early shift, he'd be an hour late, minimum. That flies when your last name matches the owner. Gene, that's how you're going to sell this to me. He paused. His work habits are a bit, well, unconventional, but he's good people. He's a raccoon in a necktie. I said, what the hell does that mean? I sighed. It wasn't worth getting into. I can't trust him, I said, if he even shows up on time. He told me he set 2 alarms. He could sleep on the hands of a giant alarm clock, and it wouldn't matter. What if something horrible happens to me before he gets there? Nothing has ever harmed anyone. Laughing, I said, doesn't mean it won't, Cappy. You kill the weevil when you see its egg, not after it eats your cotton. He paused. I'm lost. Are you the weevil or the cotton? I'm saying I don't want to open with Haints loose in the building. Before he could express his confusion again, I filled him in. Ghosts. Not a fan. Wanted to send an old priest and a young priest over to clear the room first? As you can imagine, the joke went over as well as the devil in the pew. I mean, we discussed this before I took the job. No solo opening shifts. You agreed with me. I said, try a new tack. Technically, this isn't a solo opening shift, he said weakly. I sighed, and he could sense my frustration in the huff. I wouldn't normally ask, but I'm stuck. Paul called out, and Jane can't come in until 9. We have a medicine delivery, and I need someone there to sign and stock. You aren't coming in? My day off, he said sheepishly. I'm taking the family to the beach. I held the phone away from my face and mouthed a string of curse words that would make a longshoreman repent. Sounds fun, I finally said. I consider this a personal favor to me. I stayed quiet. It was a ploy, another attempt to break him. Most people fold when silence enters a conversation. Bosses, especially weak-willed ones, weren't above caving. I was trying to wait him out. What if he started? What if you do this favor for me, and I ensure you're off 2 weekends this month? I dunno, I said. My draw is exposed as a preacher in a whorehouse. 3 weekends. He wasn't budging. Might as well get something useful for my impending trauma. A month. I offered, letting my coquettish lilt do the asking. A month it is. When my alarm went off at 5:15 in the morning, I wanted to die. I lay there and wondered what my funeral would be like. What would my decor be? Colors? Theme? Would any of my exes show up? Would my parents reunite without a Donnybrook breaking out? Who'd cry? Would my grave have a pleasant view? Once I finished Pinteresting my funeral, I got moving. Norm, our medicine delivery driver, was always prompt. We were the first stop on his route. It was easier to get meds delivered, inventoried, and stocked before we saw our first patient. That said, I'd rather eat a plain beignet dunked in hot water than check and stock meds. At this time of year, especially in the early morning, a fog would sometimes grip the landscape and hold it firm until the sun fully arrived. This was one of those days. I hit the unlock button on my key fob and saw the haunting red of my taillights wink in the billowing white clouds. From where I stood, I couldn't even see the car. Who doesn't love driving in whiteout conditions? Thanks to the fog and my overly cautious driving. Thanks, Dad. I was running behind. Norm was the most punctual man on God's green earth. He'd arrive at his grave a day early just to show the devil up. If he beat me there, he wouldn't wait long before he motored off to his next destination. No medicine in a medical clinic was generally considered a problem. Our clinic was in an odd location. Typically, when you envision a clinic, you think of it being in a medical park. Ours wasn't. We were a freestanding building surrounded by light industrial companies. Car paint shops, electronic recycling, and warehouses don't precisely align with anyone's idea of healthcare, but you take cheap real estate when you find it. After a while, it seems natural. I pulled into the parking lot exactly at 6. It was still dark out, and the fog had only gotten worse. Visibility was limited to a few feet. Hopefully, the fog would burn off in the sun, but that didn't make it any less scary. Horrid beasts hide in the fog. Everyone knew that. I stepped out and heard the buzzing of the urban cricket. I glanced up at the burnt orange light spilling from the lamppost. The fog made the lamps look like they had little halos. Utilitarian angels keeping watch over us. I nodded at the sentinels and headed to the back door. As I was jingling my keys, I heard something move inside the building. I jumped back from where I stood, as if Zeus's bolts had jolted me. "The heck?" I whispered, clutching my keys tight so they'd stay silent. I caught myself holding my breath. Had Gene gotten here before me? That didn't seem likely. His BMW wasn't in the parking lot. Plus, the man couldn't get anywhere on time, let alone early. But it sure sounded like someone was in there. I pressed my ear against the cold, wet steel door. I focused my attention on the noises inside. Footsteps, the sounds of someone opening cabinet doors. Muffled words behind steel and concrete. I couldn't make out specific words, but you know the rhythm of speech when you hear it. I quietly peeled off the door. What in the world was happening in there? I glanced down at the keys. To enter or not to enter? What would Willie Shakes have to say about this situation? Probably nothing, as he's just bones and dust at this point. While I was idling on about dead authors, the light in the parking lot winked out. Perfect. I was hiding in the dark, contemplating what monster was hiding in a haunted building, while a thick mist whipped around me. If I weren't wearing my comfy Kermit the Frog Crocs, this could be an opening scene in the latest fantasy series. It left me wondering who'd be my shining prince riding atop a white steed. There was the rumble of an engine behind me. I turned in time to see a white Dodge Sprinter van break through the fog. The green lettering on the side of the van announced that Lancelot Medical Supply Company had arrived right on time. Despite everything, I laughed. My shining knight was Norm, the medicine delivery guy. He seemed surprised to see me outside and gave me a half wave before hopping out. Norm was a late-20s white suburban man straight from Central Casting. If he had dreams or hopes or desires, he kept them under his well-worn Kansas City Royals cap. Crazy fog, ain't it? Almost missed a turn. What you doing out here? Running late this morning? I'm the reluctant early bird, I said. Pretty sure I miss a worm. Norm politely chuckled. Gotta set 2 alarms. That's what I do. If I only had one, I'd sleep right through it. Why I set a second one in the living room forces me to get up. I live in a studio apartment. I only have a living room. Suppose that would be a challenge, he said. You want to open up so we can unload these boxes? Norm, I think I hear someone inside. Coworker. I shook my head. Doc coming early? I gave him a look. When have you ever heard of doctors coming in early? Especially at a clinic? True, he said. I always want to give them the benefit of the doubt. I think it's because of the whole do no harm thing, Norm said, before he abruptly stopped speaking. His brain caught on to what I was suggesting. Finally, he hunched and whispered, "Oh, hell's brass bells. Are you talking about a thief? Or a ghost? Which is better? Should we call the cops?" With this fog, it'd take them forever to get here. These guys will be halfway to Tijuana with our stuff before they show up. Is there another car in the front patient parking lot? I haven't checked. Wouldn't that be a good start? Norm, would you recommend sending a delicate lady like myself to stroll to the front of a clinic you thought was being robbed? In whiteout conditions? His cheeks flushed red. Valid point, he said. For the record, I've never thought of you as delicate. I shoot him a look. No, I don't mean that in a bad way. I just got the feeling that you know how to handle yourself. Is all. I'm wearing Kermit Crocs. I deadpanned. Also, Kermit has Miss Piggy fight his battles. It's their dynamic. I never cared for the show, Norm said before adding, "Wait, am I Miss Piggy in this scenario?" "If the dress fits," I said. "Let's go. If we see something weird, we call the cops." Clinging to the side of the building, we gradually made our way to the front parking lot. While we walked, I realized this was the longest time I'd ever spent with Norm. We'd made small talk, but that was it. I honestly knew nothing about him other than his occupation. Unlike him, I had exactly zero hunches about his personality. I thought you guys usually had two people open the clinic together. We're supposed to. I said, where's your second? It's Gene. He's not exactly reliable. Gene, is he the balding guy? Skinny? Scraggly beard. He shaved the beard, thank God, but yes. I thought he was a manager. Boss's kid. One of those, he said as we got to the front parking lot. The fog was a little thinner here for now, but if it kept advancing, it wouldn't stay this way for long. The big news, though, was that there wasn't a car in the lot. Norm sighed. I'll go peek in the front window. I didn't stop him. He flipped his cap backwards and pressed his face against the front glass. Scanning, he shrugged. I don't wait. Oh shit, he whispered. He hurried back to me. I saw someone standing near those saloon doors, facing away from us. Was it Gene? Hard to see. Want to look? I didn't, but felt I should. I walked over and peered in. Sure enough, toward the double doors that separated the exam rooms from the treatment area. Someone was standing there with their back to us. They weren't doing anything. No robbing. No clearing out meds. Just standing. It looks like Gene, I said, once I got back over to Norm. But he's acting weird, even for him. Should we go inside? Will you go in with me? I'm scared. And if this isn't Gene and I'm alone, well, I don't want to suggest anything untoward. Wouldn't be ladylike. I said, letting that drawl out like an angler looking for a monster to hook. Of course, he said. Night arriving on a white steed? Maybe not, but I was happy for a delivery guy in a Sprinter van. I have a delivery to make, anyway. Seeing my disappointment, he quickly course-corrected. I mean, what kind of man would that make me if I let you go in alone? A no-good, rotten scoundrel, as Mima used to say. I said, but I'm too polite for that language. For the record, I call my grandma Nana. Nobody I knew growing up ever called their grandma Mima. But when the accent comes out, most people expect the southernisms to follow. I heard the beat and played my tune. We returned to the back door. The fog had advanced and thickened. The air felt charged. I held my key over the lock. I turned to Norm. Are you a good fighter? In Tekken or? I shook my head. You have a weapon in the van? Well, I have something that might work, he said. It's kind of embarrassing, though. My mind was swimming. What type of weapon could Norm have that would be embarrassing? He darted off to the van and, after some scrounging, came back holding something behind his back. What is it? He held out an old thigh-length gym sock with a knot tied at the top. He gripped the knot and let the sock fall from his hand. It dropped and bounced like a cheap bungee cord. There was something heavy and round inside. That's an 8-ball, he said, looking down. A pool ball and a sock? It's basically a mace, he said. A cheap modern version. Anyway, I've never used it. Don't want to, if I'm being honest. Is that your sock? An old one, yes. Won't the ball rip through if you swing it? I've swung it for practice. Hasn't broken yet. If it did, you just have a limp sock in your hand. Not much you can do with that. Do you want to have a weapon or not? I held up my hand. I appreciate it. It'll work or look hilarious when it fails. Marianne, come on, now. I'm trying to. The overhead lights started blinking. Turning, we watched as it strobed but couldn't stay on. It was being choked out by the much denser fog. It was so bad now that the sky was blotted out. A glance at the time told me the sun should have started peeking down at us by now, but there was no sign of it. Off in the distance, we heard thunder roll. Or, that's what we thought it was. It sounded like thunder. It was loud and rumbled, but deep in the ancient ape parts of my brain, there was a familiar fear that had nothing to do with the weather. Something older than that, more powerful. An ancestral sensation passed down through generations. A feeling that had lain dormant inside our minds until that ancient menace activated again. I felt that flicker now. You gonna open the door before the rain gets here? I shook myself back to the waking world, turning the key in the lock as quietly as humanly possible. I heard the K chunk of the mechanism unlocking. Norm clutched his sock mace so tightly, his knuckles were white. Nodding at him, I swung the door open. HLO. I called out, footsteps sprinting away from us, and a door slamming. I didn't need to see anything to know which door it was. It was exam room 6. I tried to exit but ran smack into Norm, who had leaned forward to get a look, sock at the ready. "Hello," came a familiar voice from inside. "Gene, what in the world was that man doing here so early? Where had he parked his car? What was he moving around?" "Gene," I asked, "that you? Who's that?" "Marianne," I said. "Where are you?" "Up front." "Doing what?" "Up front." I turned to Norm. "Pretty sure I'm going to make it," I said with a smile. I nodded at his limp sock. "Thank you for being ready to brain someone with your old gym sock." "Don't go in there," Norm said. I thought he was joking, but concern on his face was genuine. "That's not Gene." "What in God's green heaven are you talking about? You don't feel that? How off the energy is here?" I didn't want to admit it to myself or Norm, but ever since I'd arrived, I'd felt an unease. "Something in the fog?" "Yes," he whispered, "but also something inside. I don't think that's Gene." "Sound like him." I think it's a mimic." "I've read about them," he said, before correcting himself. "Well, watched a lot of YouTube videos about them. They use a friend or family member's voice to lure people in. Gene and I are not kin nor friends," I said. "Truthfully, the man is a worm of the highest order. He's actually worse than a worm. I'd rather have lunch with a dozen Texas Red Wigglers than share a meal with him." "I have a bad feeling about this," he said, his voice shaky. "It's been there since I walked outside and saw how thick the fog was." "It's just fog, Norm," I said. "We get it pretty often." Even as the words left my mouth and crashed into our reality, I didn't believe them. I was having the same feelings. Something was wrong. Potentially two things. Outside and in. I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince Norm or myself with my answer. "I know, but it's not just fog," Norm said. "I feel like it's covering something. Concealing it." I thought I was going crazy, and then all this started up. "That makes sense." The words got caught in my throat, and before they could escape, the lights inside the clinic winked out. Power lost. The hum of the machine slowed until they stopped. Everything went quiet, like God hit mute on our remote. Another rumble in the distance. Closer this time. The storm was approaching. "Hello? Gene or faux Gene?" We hadn't settled that yet. Called out from the dark. "What's going on?" "Come over here," I said. "I need help moving the boxes into the clinic." "Marianne?" "I'm telling you, that's not him," Norm whispered. He let the billiard ball drop from his hand, pulling the sock taut. "It's a mimic. What are you going to do? Knock it into the side pocket?" "Marianne? Marianne?" Gene said, sounding more like a minor bird than the dirtbag son of the clinic owner. There was another rumble of thunder, just down the street from us, inching closer. Norm and I both flinched as it cracked above where we stood. I looked up, but didn't see a flash of lightning. Nothing but fog. It had gotten so thick in such a short amount of time. It was now curled around Norm's van. Python fog, squeezing the life from the morning. "Norm," the fog. I started. Another violent crack of thunder stopped me. It was just outside our driveway. It was so violent, I felt the sound waves vibrate through my bones. That was a secondary concern, though. As the thunder boomed and the fog crept closer, I heard a breathy voice speak into my ear. "We're here for you." I swatted at the side of my head, as if a bug had crawled in there. Norm, stunned by my sudden impromptu dance move, nervously jumped away. I turned to him, and my face said everything I needed to say in a glance. "You heard that too?" he asked. "I think we should go inside," I said, against my better judgment. Norm tightened his grip on the sock. "I agree. I'll go in first." No argument from me. I slid aside. He took a deep breath and walked into the alcove. I glanced back at the fog. It had nearly enveloped the entire van. In the vapor, I heard movement, the wet slap of skin on concrete. I didn't hang around to find out what it was. We got inside the building, and I locked the door. I didn't want to, but my instinct snapped in, and I flipped the deadbolt without a second thought. Keep the monsters out. For a brief, sublime second, I forgot that there was also something unexplainable inside this building, too. Some days, the bear doesn't just get you. It flays you and wears your skin as a scarf. Let me turn on a light, I whispered, pulling out my phone. The beam was weak, but it provided enough light for the time being. Marianne? Marianne? Jean called out again. The voice was coming through the double saloon doors that led to the exam rooms, right where we'd seen the figure. I think this is why the phrase between a rock and a hard place took off, Norm whispered. Sweat was rolling down his nose. He wiped it with the sleeve of his uniform and sighed. The fog should lift soon. It should. The sun should be rising. Has to be. I applauded his commitment to positivity, but I'd been drifting down Shit Creek for quite some time. Not even Kermit smiling, plastic face beaming up from my Crocs, could convince me we were going to be okay. The frog had a point. It sure wasn't easy being green. We huddled together in the alcove, not moving, with a random ghost chirping at us. Well, me anyway. Moving into the treatment area of the clinic was a no-go. I wasn't sure if this thing could move and didn't want to be the employee responsible for inviting it out of exam room 6 and to where we earn our daily bread. Point was, we were trapped. There wasn't any place for us to go. Outside was, well, who knew what? Inside was a mimic trying to lure me into the dark for God knows what reason. Ground clouds had swallowed Norm's van. Only getting a month of weekends off to deal with supernatural horrors was starting to feel like a god-awful deal on my part. Womp, 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 womp. Something heavy slammed into the back door. We both yelped but quickly placed our hands over our mouths to muffle the noise. There was no window in the door, so we could only guess what was violent and dumb enough to throw themselves at pure steel. Whatever it was way worse than any solicitor hawking solar panels. That's for damn sure. Inside, the ethereal voice again. I know Norm heard it too, because he looked back at the exit. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His body was shaking. If he were a drawing, there'd be squiggly lines all around him. Nothing but hail from the storm. Marianne, Jean called out. He was closer now, too. From where we were standing at the back door, I could see the swinging double doors. They were closed. Nothing had come through. Yet, what do you do with a mimic? I asked, the fear bringing out my authentic drawl. I'm not sure, he said. I've seen a few videos, but they never talk about how to get rid of it. Hell's half-acre, I said, the twang in full effect now. I opened my phone and started typing in the search bar. Do you think the internet is going to have an answer? Norm, I'm as lost as last year's Easter egg, I said. Before he could ask, I don't know what to do. Maybe someone out there has a clue. I punched and mimicked what to do and got a result. A hopeful little cheer escaped my lips. Then I started reading. Mimic is a 1997 science fiction horror movie starring Mira Sorvino. Goddamn useless AI answer. Who wants this shit? Marianne? Come here. I need help. I don't think he needs help, Norm said. You think? I snapped. I made a face like I'd just eaten rancid meat and punched myself in the thigh. Why was this happening to me? What god had I angered? Worse, I had accidentally included Norm in this whole thing, too. All he was guilty of was being punctual. I can see them, Jean called. I can see you two. The double doors wavered. Norm and I held our breaths as hard as he clutched his sock mace. I shone my phone light toward the door. My tremulous hand quivered and bounced the beam up and down like a line on an EKG. Something is standing there, Norm whispered. Look in the crack between the doors. I'd already seen it, but was hoping it was the dark playing tricks on me. It wasn't. How do you think Mira Sorvino would handle this? I joked. The smartass in me came out in times of crisis. Admittedly, not my best quality. I expected Norm to be annoyed, but he gave me a small smile when he turned to me. I'm going to rush the door, Norm said. Scare them away. My brows furrowed. Why? Maybe they'll leave? It's a ghost. not a bunch of raccoons in the dumpster. Norm kept on, ignoring my barb. They leave, and we get a few minutes to clear our heads and plan an escape, if that's even possible. My whole body and face objected to this dumbass idea, but before words could join in, Norm held his hand up and halted my incoming response. "I'm a lost egg too," he said, butchering my southernism. "This is a long shot, I know, but what the hell else are we supposed to do? My years of delivering medicine haven't exactly prepared me for this scenario. But scaring a ghost?" I asked. "That's the move." He smiled. "It's what Mira would do." I laughed. Couldn't be helped. He nodded at my phone. "Kill the light, huh?" I placed my phone in my pocket, putting the spotlight to sleep. Norm moved to the wall where the door was and shook out his nerves. He let the sock drop and cocked his arm, ready to swing his Mizuno mace at anything threatening his life. Quietly, he started slinking along the wall. Nervous sweat had turned that Royals cap from blue to almost black. The saloon doors loomed large. My eyes flickered from him to the door so fast. It looked like I was watching Olympic ping pong. The shadow of the mimic was still there, still menacing us. From behind me, I could hear something scraping along the outside door. Nails? Claws? Was it searching for a way in? A spike of fear hit my heart. Panic and anxiety were tapping into my nervous system. I'd need my wits sharp if I wanted to survive this. I closed my eyes and slowed my breathing. We had to deal with one problem at a time. Whatever was out there could stay out there. No need to solve both ghost problems at once. Problems, like busted escalators and broken relationships, are best dealt with one step at a time. Norm got within an arm's length of the swinging door. Ghost Gene was still standing there. I couldn't make out any features of his face. It was just a form that filled in what should have been an empty space. For a fleeting second, I thought of my ex. He took up space too. Trauma is its own kind of haunting, isn't it? As Norm was about to make his blind jump at the double doors, the power kicked back on. The burst of light should have been heavenly after our time in the darkness, but its sudden arrival shocked our vision. Norm took a step back and slammed his eyes shut. I did the same. When I opened them back up, the figure was gone from the door, but they were still in the clinic, somewhere in the shadows, waiting, watching, plotting. Norm stood and blinked away the burned images. What the hell? He had more to say. Another question or two to inquire about. But those remained unasked as a large glass bottle came hurtling through the air and crashed into his forehead. Medical bottles could withstand a lot of jostling, but Norm's head must be concrete because it shattered on contact. Dozens of pills and bits of glass rained down. They pinged off the ground and scattered in all directions. A cut opened up on his forehead. The cut was slight, but grew larger as the welt under it swelled. Before he could respond, his eyes rolled back into his head, and he joined the pills sprawled on the floor. I rushed over and went into nurse mode. The lights overhead started flickering again. Once I had Norm stable, I looked in the direction from where the pills had come. Jean was there, in the corner, looking away from me. I felt a surge of anger and let it out in a scream. "What the hell is your problem, bitch?" No twang this time, just pure rage. At once, every cabinet door in the treatment room slammed open, and everything on the shelves came crashing out onto the floor. I screamed and held my hands up to protect my face. Glancing over to where Gene had been standing, yielded diddly squat. He was gone. I scanned the space. Nothing. Was it gone or hiding? My answer came in the form of another violent outburst. One of the four stands across the room took flight and came screaming for my head. I dropped to avoid being impaled by the blunt end, but one caster caught just above my temple. Pain blossomed and spread across my head like an invasive weed. I touched the spot and winced. The lights in the clinic shut off again. I ducked down between two exam tables. I tried to collect myself, but was struggling. My thoughts were water in a broken glass. I was trying to hold everything together, but it felt impossible. Everything was coming undone. "Marianne," Jean said, "come here." Not a chance, I thought. I wanted revenge. Anger raced through my body, preparing myself for action. My hands balled into fists. Skin flushed red. my teeth bared and ready to strike. Vision colored crimson. It was more than anger. I was rage. I had become Venkman, destroyer of ghosts. Unadulterated fury pushed aside any thoughts of how to achieve my revenge. Just violence in my veins. I was mad. Curse out a cheater mad. Yell at a Karen mad. Fight with my parents mad. Marianne, Jean said. Another bottle of pills sailed over my head. Marianne, Marianne, Marianne. It threw another bottle, like the one that hit Norm's melon. It smashed into a nearby wall. A firework of glass and pills exploded all around me. I watched the blue pills hit the ground, bounce, and roll until they finally came to a stop. Well, no more forward progress. But they all were still vibrating from some unfelt hum around us. Thump, 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 thump. The things in the fog were beating on the steel door. I crawled away from the shattered pill bottles and back to the alcove. The strikes against the door were violent and loud. Small dents started forming from the blows. The inside of the door now resembled a topographical map. Why were they getting violent? For that matter, why had Jean gotten more violent? Before today, the ghost in exam room 6 would only appear in glimpses, in shadows. It never spoke, never threw things. Why was it acting out? As more medical equipment went sailing through the air, a thought came to me. Norm and I both heard something in the fog say, "We're here for you." Who they were seemed unknowable. The real question I struggled with was why they were here at all. Why come to a medium-sized city? Why come to an out-of-the-way medical clinic? Why try to break in? Why come after me? Marianne. It was Norm. He'd woken up. The bruises turned his forehead into a Rothko painting. What happened? Ghost Jean throws things now, I said. He touched his head and winced. When he looked at his fingers, he saw fresh blood on the tips. I don't like... Norm's eyes went wide. The color ran out of his face. I didn't need to feel his hands to know they were clammy. This map was leading him to one place. He was about to faint. Stay still, I said. Try to control your breathing. You're gonna be okay. It's just a little. Thump. Norm passed back out. On the way to Sleepsville, his head hit the wall. The impact caused a small crack to form in the drywall. The white residue dotted his face like an artist running their thumb over the tips of a brush to create stars in the night sky. Norm was out. I swallowed hard. I was alone. Jean was calling for me and throwing things all over the room. The creatures outside were incessantly beating on the back door. Pushing myself back against the wall near the alcove, I shut my eyes tight. I brought my legs up to my chest and wrapped my arms around my knees, placing my elbows over my ears. I tried to drown out the noise. If I sat still long enough, this whole thing would blow over. We're here for you. The phrase beat against the walls of my skull. Logically, none of this made sense. Yet, the entire ordeal evoked familiar feelings I'd long buried in the depths of my brain. Fights. Real knockdown drag-out ones. Old battles flooded my cortex. My ex and I right before the whole engagement blew up, and I moved away when my roommate admitted she had stolen rent money from me. That time I got nose to nose with a cat caller, but those paled in comparison to the big ones that scared me. Memories bubble up of Mom and Dad going at it before their divorce. Colorful phrases, vague accusations, harsh truths, hiding from the fear, watching the Muppets to drown out their screaming, feeling like I was stuck in the middle. The middle. My eyes shot open. Kermit's unblinking gaze stared back at me. The smallest green shoot of an idea broke through the topsoil in my mind. What if it is just like those fights? What if they weren't after me or Norm? What if they were fighting with each other? Kermit, you magnificent bastard. Jumping up from the floor, a crazy plan quickly formed. I looked at where Norm had passed out. He was still slumbering like baby Jesus in the manger. I heard the crashing of more equipment in the treatment area. His attention wasn't on us. I rushed over to the door. The creatures in the fog were still there, still wailing away at the steel. I put my hand on the handle, and the lights in the clinic shut off. Everything went still. The only sounds were Norm's concussed snores. Marianne... Jean. He was standing directly behind me. like before, he kept his gaze in the opposite direction, his true face still hidden. It didn't matter. Fear still gripped my heart and gave a squeeze. "Mary Ann, what are you doing?" The creatures in the fog went wild at the sound of his voice, like I had just paraded around starving dogs in a meat suit, frenzied, bedlam. They could sense Jean near the door. It cemented my hunch. These things didn't want me or Norm. They wanted Jean. The lights inside the clinic began to strobe. I glanced at where Jean had been standing. He was gone. That's when I felt the hair on my neck move. Freezing fingers dragged across my skin. A raspy voice in my ear. "They'll kill you too." "No," I said. "They won't." I yanked the door open, and the fog outside surged in. There was a rumble in the clouds. But it wasn't from lightning. It sounded like dozens of voices speaking at once in a language I'd never heard before. Something inhuman. Ancient. The commotion nudged Norm back into the land of the living. His eyes fluttered open, but he couldn't believe what they were seeing. "Mary Ann," he yelled. "What's happening?" I heard his voice, but just barely. I couldn't respond even if I wanted to. The voices crying out from the clouds had funneled into the clinic. Hidden creatures rushed into our building. Jean had disappeared as soon as I had wrenched the door open. I heard her move through the treatment room, knocking into the mess on the floor, sending bottles and equipment flying in its wake. Hell followed with him. Jean fled through the swinging double doors. The fog chased him. As more of them streamed in from the outside, the noise in the clinic grew louder. I could barely hear the slamming of a door from the hallway, but I instantly knew where Jean had gone. Exam room 6. He was trying to hide from these things. Norm crawled over to where I had dropped and curled into a ball. He was saying something and pointing, but the deafening noise of chanting voices was too loud to make out. He shook my shoulder and I opened my eyes. My jaw dropped. What looked like a white snake of fog poured in from outside. It ran through the treatment area and shot down the exam room hallways. I now say it was a snake, but at that moment, it brought to mind an umbilical cord, connection between mother and child. From the exam room, we heard a scream in human pain. The chanting voices got louder. The fog began to glow and pulse. There was crashing and thrashing coming from the hallway. They'd found Jean. I pushed myself behind the open door and curled into the fetal position. I snapped my eyes shut again and covered my ears with my arms. Seconds later, I felt Norm's body as he squeezed in next to me. He draped his frame over mine, repeating something that sounded like a prayer. The double doors flew off their hinges as the fog started retracting from the building, over the chanting in my attempt to block the outside world. I could hear Jean screaming Mary Ann repeatedly. It got louder as the fog dragged his form past us. As soon as it crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut and everything went quiet. The power turning back on was what finally made me open my eyes. The first thing I saw was a sweat-stained Kansas City Royals cap. I nudged Norm in the ribs, and he opened his eyes as well, realizing that he was squishing me. He quickly moved and apologized. The air was still, but it felt new, clean. The heaviness was gone. The room still looked like an F5 tornado had torn through it, but I didn't feel Jean. That evil energy was gone. I stood and swung open the back door. I expected to find a wall of fog, but I saw the orange rays of the rising sun. The sky was clear. The fog was gone. No storm damage. No water from rain. Nothing. What the hell? Norm said, taking in the scene. Where did everything go? Including the time, he said. I turned to him. He held up his phone. It was only 6:10 in the morning. There is no way that only took 10 minutes to happen. At least 30, I said, confused. Maybe more. A brand new cherry red BMW turned into the parking lot. Despite being early in the morning, the radio blared some Euro dance music. It came to a stop in the handicap spot. Jean, the real one, hopped out his car and shot finger guns at Norm and me. What are you goobers staring at? Never seen a new car before. He hit his fob and locked his car. He turned his wrist and looked down at his Rolex. 6:10. I'm early, he said with a smile. Set 2 alarms to get here on time. Did you see any fog? Norm asked. Only the mild brain fog, I had waking up this early. Had to get some go juice before my mind started firing on all cylinders. Jean said with a yawn, "No storm." I followed up, "And before you start spouting nonsense, I just mean a rainstorm." "Dry as an old lady," Jean said with a wink. "We can unload this truck, or what?" "Or what?" I said. Confused, Jean laughed. "Let me go place my stuff in my locker. Then we can do whatever." He started walking inside the building, but stopped and turned back to us. I should mention that I tweaked my back windsurfing, so I might not be able to move any boxes. "Cool? Cool." He walked inside. I looked at Norm, and then held up 3 fingers. 2 fingers. 1 finger. On cue, Jean screamed, "What the fuck happened in here?" "You okay?" Norm asked. "Are you?" I said, touching the top of my head. He felt his wound, winced, and smiled. "I'll live. I have to see Bobby win a World Series." "I don't know what that means. Is he a player or?" Gene came out, his face aghast. "What happened?" "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," I said. "Try me." Creatures in a thick fog abducted the ghost from exam room 6. He threw a fit and trashed the place before they dragged him off. Plus the time dilation, Norm added. Gene looked at me and then Norm. "Did you two crack into the meds or something?" "No," I said, "but I am leaving to grab some breakfast. You got this, right?" "What?" "I don't open alone. If you leave, I'll tell my dad." "Bless your heart." I said in a drawl so thick you get a foot caught stepping in it. "You're Southern?" Gene said, "If you leave, you're going to lose your job." I shrugged. "Norm? Want to get Denny's?" "Yup." Mary Ann, come here. I need help." Norm and I started laughing. The real thing had replaced the mimic. He sucked as much as his ghost version. We both left Gene standing there ranting and raving. He kicked a nearby pole and collapsed to the ground in pain. I smiled. Story 10. I always wanted to be a superhero until I got what I wished. I used to love comics when I was a kid. All of them were great, but the best to me were the ones that were larger than life. Super strong, super tough, able to shoot lasers out of their hands or eyes, and most of all, able to fly, because that seems the most super, doesn't it? Being stronger or faster than everyone else, or able to take a hard punch. That's cool and all, but you're just higher on a continuum that every other person is on somewhere. Lasers and shit. Normal people can't do that, of course, but it's also not that practical or useful unless you're fighting giant monsters or supervillains. And we don't have those. So what would you use it for most of the time? But flying? No one can do that, and it'd be super fun and useful. Maybe even be able to heal people too. So you can like fly in, save someone, and then actually fix them instead of flying to a hospital or something and hoping they don't die on the way, or get hurt worse with you flying so fast to get them to a doctor. Stupid kid shit, sure, but you can't say I didn't think it out. You need to understand that comics were an escape for me. They always had been, but by the time I was 15, well, I wanted to live in those pages rather than out in the world. Aside from a normal awkward teenage angst, I was also dealing with a father dying of cancer, and a mother who was drinking so hard she seemed determined to beat him to the grave. I tried to help, but when I saw there wasn't really anything I could do, I just retreated into my head instead, filled it with comics and other stories to distract me from the things going on around me. That's probably why it took me a minute to register the cries coming out from underneath the bridge. It was an old wooden bridge stretching over a small river on the north side of town and connecting 2 ends of a small road that had been deemed barely worth paving every decade or 2. I only went that way because it was a quick and quiet way to get to school without having to ride the bus. And the most excitement I'd ever had on it was the time I saw a water moccasin hustling across before I got too close. When I heard the cry, that snake was somehow the first thing I thought of as I came out of my plodding stupor. No, not a snake. Stupid. It was a woman. calling out for help somewhere nearby, not on the road or in the nearby brush, but underneath my feet, heart beating faster. I went to the end of the bridge and cut back down the slope and ran under. I was only a few feet down when I could see a middle-aged woman wet and bleeding from several cuts on her face and arms, standing on a small outcropping of rocks in the middle of the narrow, lazy river. Her face lit up when she saw me, and she reached out her hands, but only a little, as though she was afraid of falling from a precarious perch. "Oh, thank be. Have you come to help me? Please say that you have." I nodded. Yeah, sure. Are you hurt?" She sniffled pitifully. "A little banged up from when they tried to take me, but I'll be all right once I'm back home." I frowned. "Take you? Like someone tried to kidnap you or something?" The woman nodded. "They did. I managed to get the best of them and pitch myself over the bridge, but all I could manage is getting onto this rock." She looked at the water fearfully and then back to me. "I can't swim, and I need help getting to the bank." I wanted to say that she could pretty much just walk out, but I held my tongue. She was clearly banged up and maybe in shock too. Why did it matter if she could do it herself, if I was there and able to help her? Smiling at her, I started making my way down to the water's edge. "No need to worry. I'll be glad to help you get across." She beamed at this. "Oh, thank you so much. It really means the world to me." I sucked in a breath as the cold water swirled around my ankles, and with each step I went in deeper. But I was still only at my waist by the time I reached the edge of her perch. Giving her an awkward grin, I offered my hand. "It's really not bad. The river is really slow here. But don't worry. Just hold my hand, and I can't." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She shook her head as she looked past me to the water. I know this sounds silly, but can I just get on your back? I can't get into the water. I just can't." I felt confused and irritated, and I wanted to argue, but I was trying to do a good thing. And the sooner it was over, the sooner I could get home and get dry. Looking at her, she didn't weigh much, and if push came to shove, I could drag her to shore whether she liked it or not. Trying not to let my emotions show, I nodded to her. Yeah, okay." I turned around. "Climb on." She was even lighter than she looked. It only took her a moment to settle onto my back, and then I started back across without another word. It wasn't hard, but it was more awkward, and I took my time picking my way across the slick river rocks on that return trip. There were a couple of times where I wobbled and I felt her nails dig into my shoulders, but otherwise, we made it across without incident. When we reached land, I squatted down, and she climbed off gingerly. Now that it was done, I felt awkward and even colder, but I felt like I needed to ask if she needed to go to the doctor or something before I just bailed. I was about to do just that when she reached out and touched my chest lightly. "Thank you for saving me." I felt my chest flutter nervously. She wasn't pretty and seemed fairly old, at least a 15-year-old me, but she was a girl touching my chest. Nah, it was nothing. Are you okay?" She nodded, meeting my eyes earnestly. "I am now, thanks to you. I'd like to repay you for your kindness." I could hear blood in my ears. Was this some kind of sexual proposition? No, surely not. Probably wanted to give me some money, or something. I should just say no thanks. If she pushed it, take the money and, "What do you wish for?" I stared at her, confused. Wish? I mean, I don't need anything for just doing the right thing. Do. Her thick eyebrows knitted into a frown. "No, you misunderstand. I'm granting you a wish. A real one. Tell me what you wish for, and you will receive it." Okay, so this was some kind of weird sex thing. I was young and perpetually horny, but I still wasn't looking to get blown by some weird old lady under a bridge. Mind racing. I decided to just act like I took it literally and said the first thing that came into my head. Okay, well, I'd like to be able to fly then." My father's face flashed in my mind, and I felt an irrational stab of guilt, as though I was somehow depriving him of some real opportunity, to be able to fly and heal people. I looked out at the river as I talked, but now I looked back down to her. "If that's okay." She gave a little laugh. "That's fine. An excellent wish. It is granted." My chest suddenly felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. Panicking, I took a step back and turned around, as though looking for some cause or help. It didn't seem strange until later that I hadn't tried to have a woman help me. Not that it would have mattered. The feeling disappeared as soon as it had come, and when I turned back to where the woman had been, she was gone. I walked back the way I'd come. No way I could go to school soaked like I was, and I suddenly felt run out and tired. I expected to see my father in the living room when I got there, but he was gone. I'd forgotten that Mom had to take him to a doctor's appointment that morning. And looking at the oven clock, I was amazed to see it was already after 10. Had I really spent that long down at the river? Shaking my head, I stumbled to my bedroom and stripped off my wet clothes before crawling into bed. I was only planning on sleeping for a few minutes, but when I woke up, my alarm clock said it was 3:30 in the afternoon. I could hear the TV coming from the living room now too. Getting up, I was surprised with how spry and light I felt. Everything felt easier. When I left the bedroom, my father looked around and gave me a wave. "Hey man, finally woke up? Did you come home early from school today?" I let out a slow breath. I never made it. I was crossing the old bridge that way. I usually go, and there was some lady underneath that needed help. She said someone tried to kidnap her or something, and she got free and was stuck out in the middle of the water. He let out a chuckle as he raised his eyebrow at me. "You bullshitting me?" I shook my head. "No, for real. She was weird about crossing the water, so I helped her get across." Studying me for a moment, he seemed to decide I wasn't joking after all. "Did you call the cops about it?" I didn't have a chance. Once we were back on the bank, she must have run off or something, because I turned around and she was gone. My father was frowning a little now, his now thin face making every expression look more severe. "Well, I'm glad you're okay. You have to be careful of things like that." I stared at him, confused. Things like, what? I just helped a lady. He waved his hand at me. I know, and I'm proud of you for helping. But it is a strange thing, isn't it? Her story is odd. She sounds odd too. It could have been set up to rob you or something, I don't know. Something else nasty. Just saying, it's a strange world and you have to be careful. My father sighed as he looked at me, not trying to be a downer. "I am proud of you." He opened his arms to hug me, and I stepped over to embrace him. He'd never been much of a hugger, but that had changed in the last few months too. Yeah, it was weird. My jaw clamped shut as I embraced him, my mind flooded with new sensations and ideas. I could feel him. Not just feel that I was hugging him. I could feel what he was feeling, feel how he was. Feel the cancer that was spreading throughout his organs, little by little. Jesus. My father pulled back and looked at me questioningly. "What's the matter?" More out of instinct than anything else, I pulled him close again. "Nothing, Dad. It's nothing." As I held him, I felt a warm flare up inside me and pass into him. It only took a couple of seconds, and then I pulled away. I wasn't sure what it had done for him, but I felt heavier and more tired now, as though I'd lost something in the process. Whatever that process was, he still looked a little concerned, but decided to change the subject as he pointed toward the other end of the house. "Your mother, those doctor trips take a lot out of her. She's laying down now. Do you mind fixing us some dinner in a bit? I don't think I have it in me today." I nodded. "Yeah, sure, Dad. I'll fix it." The next morning, I woke up to my father humming in the kitchen as he made us breakfast. When I gave him a questioning look, he grinned and said he was feeling better today than he had in a good while. I could see it too. He looked a little less tired and brittle, and his movements were a bit less stiff. I already felt like I knew what it was, but I didn't want to get my hopes up. The day before had been weird, and it might all have been my imagination. All that being said, it hadn't seemed like it was in my head at the time, and the odd ways I felt since saving that woman and making my wish hadn't left either. I'd felt strangely light before hugging my father, and then tired and heavy after, that had slowly faded throughout the evening. And this morning I was feeling lighter and more energetic again, even more than I had the day before. Still, I didn't need to rush to any conclusions. Instead, I'd just watch him and see how he was for now. So we sat together, eating breakfast and talking like we often did. But there was a different flavor to it now. It wasn't just that he had more energy. He was laughing and talking more the way he used to, like he had before he had lost all hope. Still, I tried not to get my own hope up too much, hard as that was. And I was also distracted by how I was feeling. I still felt good, but everything felt slightly unreal, as though I was a cloud floating along above a world I couldn't quite reach. I was still trying to figure out what was wrong with me when I realized Dad was talking to me again. Huh? He laughed. I asked if you want to go for a walk. I don't plan on overdoing it, but I actually feel like getting out for a bit, and I want to take advantage. Heart pounding, I grinned and nodded. Yeah, that sounds awesome. There was a 3-mile trail behind the house, running its way through the woods before finally petering out into a large opening that had probably once been a cattle field decades earlier. My father used to jog it every week, but now most days he was doing good to make it out to check the mail. But then again, most days wasn't that day, and with every step that didn't seem tired or winded. I felt myself growing more excited that somehow I really had healed him the day before. I asked him a couple of times if he wanted to stop, but he always said he was good to go farther. And unlike most things lately, I could tell it wasn't just him putting on a brave face. We were probably 2 miles down the trail, and in the heart of the woods when he had the coughing fit. His face turned red, and he gripped his knees as his whole body shook with spasms of coughing. And out of reflex, I reached out to pat him on the back as I asked if he was okay. As soon as I touched him, I knew the answer. The cancer was still there, maybe slightly smaller or asleep at the moment, but still reaching out with a dozen poison arms. Fuck, I thought I had. Simultaneously, several things happened. The first is that I felt that despair and anger that had become so familiar lately flaring up inside me again. Though now it was worse because it had become married to some sense that I had failed my father. The second was that warmth growing again in my center, a small flame telling me that I could do it again, that I could do more, that I could still fix this. The third? It was a gust of wind. When the wind hit us, my coughing father didn't even notice. His eyes were watering and shut as he braced against the latest round. For me, however, everything changed forever. I felt my feet leave the ground like the tail of a kite, my whole body floating up at the wind's urging. I had a moment of delight before it was replaced with terror. I wasn't just flying. I was being pushed backward by the breeze, instinct taking over. I reached out and touched my father again, gripping the back of his shirt this time, using it to pull myself to him and wrap my arms around him. It all felt so natural as it happened. As soon as my arms and chest were tight against him, I felt that heat in me flare up and flow out into him. If the day before had been a candle, this was a bonfire, rushing between us in a torrent, burning out the sickness in him. I could feel the cancer recoiling, curling in on itself, disappearing as if it had never been at all. But that wasn't all I felt. My feet returned to ground, and I felt heavy and tired again, less a balloon now and more a lump of sour clay. My father, he kept getting lighter and lighter. I tell myself I didn't understand that at the time, that it was only in retrospect that I realized what was really happening. But I think maybe that's a lie. It's not just power the wish gave me, flying or healing, whatever mockery what I thought I was asking for that the witch gave me. It's an instinct, a core understanding or muscle memory that I didn't have before. Even that I could excuse, hell, I have excused at times over the years since, as an element of whatever I've been cursed with. It's not my choice, it's just part of the magic, right? Except for what happened next. My father turned and looked at me, his eyes wide. I was holding onto his face at this point, his happy tears pooling against my thumbs and running down my wrists. He knew. Somehow he fucking knew what I'd done. Son, did you just take it away? I was starting to cry a little now too. Yeah, Daddy, I think so. His face crumpled a little, and he gave a nod in my hands. I thought so, but how? Swallowing, I gave a shrug. That woman, she gave me a wish. He let out a wet laugh. And you wish to heal me? I looked up at the sky. Kind of. Well, I don't understand how, but what's happening? The soft, tentative joy in my father's face and voice had been replaced by confusion and fear, and I felt my hands tighten on his face even as I saw his feet and legs start to drift up behind him. Oh God, please no. Don't do this to him. I didn't mean it. I said the words, and I meant them, But that didn't mean I believed him entirely, even then. Some of it was truly a prayer, but most of it was for my father. I didn't want him to be afraid, but I also didn't want him blaming or hating me, especially when something inside of me said what had to happen next for it to last. I started crying harder. I really did love him so much. What's happening to me? I'm floating? I don't let go. Please get me down. But I love myself more. I let go of his face, twisting free of his frantic attempt to grab me again. It all happened fast. Within a moment, he was out of reach, sailing higher and higher to the treetops and beyond. Within less than a minute, I couldn't hear him screaming anymore. My mother was still passed out when I got back home. I told them later that I'd eaten breakfast with my father, that he'd seemed in good spirits, and then he'd wanted to go for a walk alone, that I'd offered to go too, but he'd insisted that he was okay and wanted time alone. They never found him, of course, but after the first few days, no one was even really looking. It took a couple of months before I started feeling light again. It came on slower this time, but as soon as I noticed a change, a part of my brain started preparing. I'd like to say it was hard for me to do it again, but it'd be another lie. After the first, it became much easier. The keys are illness and access, because as I found out early on, my transfer of healing for gravity doesn't work if they aren't very ill. At first, I tried to use people in hospice, but do you know how hard it is to find someone close to death and get enough opportunity to do what had to be done without it being detected? It wasn't just about me not being seen or recorded, though that was a huge part of it. I also have to do it outside. Otherwise, I'd leave miraculously healthy people floating along a ceiling like a forgotten birthday balloon. That would lead to a different kind of scrutiny than someone almost dead disappearing. The kind that'd get me found and locked up in some dark hole the rest of my life, being tortured and experimented on. But over time, I've developed a method. First of all, homeless people. Most of them will never be missed, and most of them have a variety of health problems. Plus, they're usually outside most of the time. So here's what I do. Every 2 or 3 months, it varies, but I can always feel it coming a few days ahead of time now. I head out on a road trip, pick a large city I haven't visited too recently, and go to one of the worst parts of town. I always carry a gun, of course, as I'm not under any illusions that I'm the only dangerous thing out that night. I find someone by themselves and give them a bit of money. I folded 5 or 10 usually. Never coins because of fingerprints, and never too much money, so I'm not too memorable if they're not the one, because I make sure to touch them when I hand them the money. I can see everything about them from that now. The ones that are sick enough, I tell them that I actually have more money nearby if they are willing to walk with me a bit. Some are smart enough to say no, but most aren't. They think it's a ruse or the start of some degradation for money. But they're too desperate to refuse a chance for more. So they follow me into an alley I've already checked out. No one else there, no cameras, nothing above us to get caught on. I'm so fast with it all now. It reminds me of a spider, dashing forward and feeding, trading venom for life. I'm gripping their face and spreading the tape across their mouth all in one motion. The tape is rough enough to avoid prints on one side and very hard to remove on the other. The heat roars through me, and I feel my feet settle firmly into ground even as they are pinwheeling through a variety of sensations. Fear and surprise, warm joy and feeling better than they have in years. Then new confused terror as they feel themselves start to float away. I used to look into their eyes. I felt like I owed it to them. I'm not a serial killer. After all, no monster. I'm only doing what I have to do to survive, and I hate that it is necessary. It's easier to not look at their face, to not see them as people. They are just a meal, reminders of an ugly truth, a forlorn balloon that is best let go. So that's what I do. I silence and restore them, and then I release them into the starry night. Their shadowed silhouettes spiral up into dark, shadow among shadows, drifting on, flying through the black sky. I do watch this for a few moments, every time. In its own way, it is kind of miraculous and beautiful, after all. And then, like them, I disappear,